The Ministry of Magic was a place of ceaseless, loud activity by day, but tonight it was a cathedral of quietude. Only one soul remained awake deep within the Department of Non-Used Artifacts, DNUA, Elias Thorne, the Archive Keeper of the Night. Elias was a man built for silence. His job began when the last aura had flewed home, and the final memo had been charmed to its destination. It was an occupation that demanded patience, a respect for forgotten things, and an eye for the minuscule but meaningful anomaly. He sat at his large, cluttered desk, its mahogany surface scored with the faint trails of long-gone spilled potions and the dust of 1,000 forgotten scrolls. A low-wattage, enchanted desk lamp cast a warm, focused pool of light, illuminating a chipped porcelain mug of cold mint tea and the open pages of a brief history of Muggle doorknobs. He was studying the structural integrity of the cylinder-pin tumbler mechanism, purely for pleasure. Around him stretched the high, dim corridors of the archive, endless shelves heavy with books that had been silent for decades. The magic here was not gone. It was sleeping, a vast, powerful slumber. The only sound, beyond the gentle turning of a page, was the steady, rhythmic toot-tock of the Ministry's main administrative clock, 3 floors below, marking the time with a slow, reassuring regularity. It was precisely in the middle of a chapter on the lever handle when the silence was fractured. It wasn't a loud noise. Nothing in the DNUA ever was. It was a subtle sound, a quiet but distinct, low sigh that seemed to originate from the 7th shelf of the southeast folio section. It was the sound of magic, utterly weary, of a magical object reaching the limits of its endurance. Elias put his finger on the exact structure of the doorknob, making a mental note of the position. He stood up slowly, already knowing what awaited him. The night's work had begun. Elias Thorne set his empty mug down with a caution that defied the solidity of the mahogany desk. His movements were not quick. They were deliberate, the economy of motion perfected by a man who had spent decades keeping company with quiet things. His steps, cushioned by the deep silence of the archive, were almost imperceptible as he approached the source of the sound. The sight confirmed his immediate intuitive worry. The folio, the compendium of useful delusions, rested on the shelf, but its deep, resonant ruby spine was no longer ruby. It had visibly dulled, fading to a tired, burnt sienna. This wasn't damage from a curse or a spill. It was the slow, draining exhaustion caused by carrying the cumulative weight of unfulfilled collective wishes. Every time someone in the Ministry had muttered, "I wish that new regulation would just disappear," the compendium bore the faintest magical strain. "Rest now, old friend," Elias murmured, his voice a low vibration in the dust-filled air. He carefully lifted the colossal book. It was heavy, not just with parchment and leather, but with the dense, compressed energy of wistful human hope. His task was clear. The compendium needed the Slumber Sector. This was not a flight to safety, but a solemn procession through the Ministry's silent veins. Elias clutched the exhausted folio tightly, its fading warmth comforting in his hands. Their journey began by passing a row of unused flue network fireplaces. They were dark and cold now, the grates meticulously swept, smelling only of fine ash and ancient soot. Elias paused for a breath, recalling the frenetic morning scenes. The green flash, the shout of destination, the rush of daily human magic. Now they were merely blank portals, waiting patiently for the dawn. The deepest silence, however, lay in the atrium. As Elias emerged from the stairwell, the massive hall opened before him, vast and hollow. Moonlight, filtered through the high arched glass ceiling, poured down in pale silver columns. The golden fountain of magical brethren, usually a roaring centerpiece of activity and light, was now a silent, majestic monument to stillness. The bronze statues, the witch, the wizard, the house elf, and the goblin stood frozen in their pose, their eyes closed against the moonlight, waiting. The magic here was not gone. It was merely dreaming. Every polished surface reflected the silvery quiet, echoing the profound peace of a world put to sleep, carried forward by one solitary man and the tired magic he protected. Elias did not continue through the main halls. Instead, he angled toward a seemingly unremarkable deep mahogany door tucked between two ancient busts of former ministers. This door, he knew, was nothing more than an elaborate camouflage. Placing a hand on the cool wood, he did not use a wand or utter a password. He simply thought the word quietude. The door did not swing open, but rather dissolved, the wood grain pulling apart and flowing like slow honey, revealing a narrow passage. This led to the Slumber Sector. It was a small, circular room, entirely lined with stone that had absorbed so much gentle, residual magic over the years that it felt faintly warm to the touch, like granite left in the summer sun. The air here was heavy with a comforting lethargy, smelling faintly of lavender and the pure, undisturbed magic of deep rest. In the center of the room sat a circular, low podium of dark, rich wood. Its surface was carved into several shallow indentations, each lined with deep, dust-red velvet. These were the beds. Many were already occupied. Elias glanced at the other occupants' folia, scrolls, and even a small tarnished silver music box. These were the artifacts that held the magic of things that had simply ceased to be relevant. A collection of forgotten school charms, the fading lyrics of old wizarding anthems, the rules for rituals no longer performed. They slept, each emitting a faint, pulsating light, a heartbeat of magic in repose. He approached the podium and found the one remaining empty indentation. Carefully, reverently, Elias lifted the compendium of useful delusions and placed it onto the velvet. The material yielded softly, receiving the heavy book with absolute gentleness. He brushed the back of his hand over the folio's dull spine. "Rest, old friend," he whispered, his voice catching slightly in the profound silence. "Rest from the weight of human hopes." This was the true, quiet burden of the book. It didn't collect lies, but the beautiful, tenacious, and ultimately unrealized dreams that wizards and witches held close. It was the archive of the almost was, and that was tiring work. The moment the compendium settled fully into the velvet cradle, a sudden bright jolt occurred. The tired, burnt sienna color of the spine flashed, not with fire or explosion, but with the immediate, vibrant return of its original deep, ruby hue. The small, warm chamber, filled with a sound as thin and clear as a distant bell chime. The sound of magic not being used for grand feats or confrontation, but simply healing itself, breathing back its own life. Elias smiled, a slow, gentle expression of satisfaction, knowing that the balance of the quiet ministry had been restored. The mahogany door solidified silently behind Elias, the grain knitting back together like a closing eye. He ran his hand over the smooth wood. It felt cool and permanent once more. The momentary disruption was over. The rhythm of the night could now reassert itself. The return journey through the high corridor of the DNUA felt even quieter than before. A deep, pervasive hush that followed the restorative chime of the compendium's healing. Elias knew the archive was satisfied. The silent mechanisms of magical preservation had clicked back into place. He reached his desk, the familiar square of lamplight, a welcoming beacon in the vast, shadowed room. The faint, silver glow of pre-dawn was beginning to lighten the edges of the high windows, signaling the imminent end of the deepest dark. Elias picked up his cold mint tea. Deciding against drinking it, he used a simple, practiced wand motion. A soft blue glow enveloped the chipped porcelain mug, and in 3 smooth seconds, the tea was replaced by a fresh, steaming infusion of calming chamomile, its gentle floral aroma mingling with the leather and ozone. He settled back into his chair, the leather creaking once a small, necessary sound in the encompassing silence. He looked out over the aisles, at the endless, motionless rows of books and scrolls that held the secrets and forgotten minutiae of the wizarding world. Each artifact was a sleeping memory, a dormant spell, a piece of quiet history awaiting the light. The clock from below offered its steady, unchanging promise. Toot-tock, toot-tock. Elias allowed his eyelids to droop slightly, feeling the peaceful weight of the ministry resting around him, entrusted to his quiet vigil. His work was not to battle darkness, but simply to tend the light that remained, to protect the restful silence. In this profound quiet, away from the flash and fury of daily magic, he was the steadfast heart, the last guardian of the stillness. He took a slow, deep breath, the scent of chamomile and old knowledge grounding him. The quiet was complete. All is well, the ministry seemed to sigh. Rest now. With the promise of the coming dawn hovering softly over the sleeping city, Elias Thorne closed his eyes and allowed the stillness of the archive to become his own.